Hey there, my name is Ross Reddick. I'm a minister in the Presbyterian Church, U.S.A., and I'm certainly glad that you've joined us for this devotion time. This devotion is going to be about the Gospels. I was hosting a lesson recently at my church, and the group was walking through the Gospel of Matthew together, journeying with Jesus toward the cross during the Lenten season. And I posed a question to the group. I said, what are these Gospels? I think the simplicity of the question perhaps took everyone off guard, for a loop a little bit. Sure, everyone knows what the gospel is, the gospel of Jesus Christ, which we preach and teach, the good news that God in Jesus Christ redeems us and offers us abundant life and salvation. But the question wasn't about that big picture gospel. It's about these four smaller picture, the Gospels. What are they? Sometimes we don't think about that much. Well, today, that's what this time is going to be about. We'll spend a little time exploring that question. We could look at all four of the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, but I think that might be biting off a little bit more than we can chew in a short video, and so we're going to look at the question through the lens of a single Gospel, the Gospel of Matthew. Matthew is an intriguing Gospel for several reasons, but the primary one is that this gospel defies any kind of clear classification. It certainly is a narrative about Jesus, but its language isn't relegated simply to the past alone. It's not just pure history. It speaks also about and to the time in which it was written. It addresses the future as well. It's really an amalgamation, a sort of mix of history and apocalyptic eschatology, sort of end times stuff. It's narrative, it's prophecy, and it's also what's known to scholars of literature as Hellenistic biography. We'll talk a little bit more about what that is in a minute. Remember, the words that we read in the New Testament were written in a swirling sea of Mediterranean, Hellenistic, Greek, Roman cultures, full of rich kind of legends, various gods and heroes. This is, we think of those Greek and Roman gods we learned about during school perhaps. But the Gospels, the four in the Bible that you and I read, are a unique kind of genre. If you're a word lover, here's a good one that you might be able to write down. Sui generis, it's a Latin term that means of its own kind. That's what our Gospels are. I think the closest parallel we have to relate our Gospels to is these Greco-Roman Hellenistic biographies that I mentioned earlier. You know, you and I hear the word biography and we think of these huge modern biographies. Hellenistic biographies, on the other hand, were much shorter, much more focused than modern biographies. It wasn't really important to capture every detail of a person's life because the point wasn't really about recording history. The point of this genre of biography was to make a moral or political statement to one's readers. In fact, large swaths of a person's life would simply be absent from these sorts of biographies because too much attention to unimportant or trivial kind of details would take away from the intended message of the author. Very often the point was to highlight certain virtues or characteristics in a hero's life, thereby, of course, advocating those virtues in the lives of the common people, just your run-of-the-mill folks. So all of that taken together begins to let us see that our Gospels have some of those same qualities. We don't have every detail about Jesus' life, very similarly, because the point wasn't necessarily to record every factual detail of his history. The point was to make a point, to persuade, to advocate, to teach, etc. So you take that ancient Hellenistic kind of biography as a base, and now we start adding other stuff to it. Things like unique Jewish characteristics of writing. This means poetry in some areas, most of which is sort of parallel construction. It means scribal arguments and rationales in other areas. Jewish literature has certain emphases on the law and piety, of course, we know. A little bit of interest in numbers as symbols in the Bible, and of course, scriptural quotations and the fulfillment of prophecies, genealogies, and other things like that. So you've got the Jewish characteristics added to the base of this Hellenistic biography, and also you have unique Christian elements. So we have accounts of the Virgin Mary, right? The early church discipline and morals and rules and codes. We have stuff about baptism. We have very clear understandings about Jesus as this Messiah, with a special focus on his death and its significance in the Christian life. And so you take all of that wrapped up together, and in general, Gospels are sort of like a mutt, if you think about dogs and breeds. You know, there are breeds of dogs who have a perfect pedigree back generations and generations. And then you have a mutt, which is just, again, a mix of lots of different kinds of breeds. That's sort of what this gospel is. And all of this, of course, happened in different ways and with different stresses and accents, depending on which gospel you happen to be reading. To switch gears a little bit, there was a time in biblical scholarship when gospel harmonies were all the rage. Lots of writing about how it is that biblical scholars could take pieces and parts from all four of the Gospels and create for ourselves a better, more clear picture of the whole. Now, I don't wish to deride any methodology without reason, but quite frankly, there might be reason to reject this kind of project of harmonizing our four Gospels. Very simply, there is little to be gained by doing this, and in fact, it might actually do more harm than good. I want to try a thought experiment. Think of the big picture gospel, the good news that we know and love, like a three-dimensional object. Let's try a tree, for example, as we imagine together. The Gospels are sort of like pictures of that tree. Each picture most assuredly captures certain qualities and intricacies and details about the tree. Each picture, however, is taken from different distances or from different perspectives, from different angles. And so each picture is not identical, and we wouldn't expect it to be that way. One side of this tree looks quite different, after all, from the other sides, but it's still the same tree. And so trying to harmonize the Gospels would be like trying to overlay these images on top of one another, as you see here. And if you look, you don't really gain any detail or have a better image by doing that. You actually make things quite blurry and very strange. And so thankfully, scholarship in general has left this harmonizing stuff behind, although there still are a few hangers-on. Well, I hope that you've enjoyed this lesson about the nature of the Gospels. I hope maybe you've learned something or found something inspirational in this video, and I hope you'll join us next time. Thanks. Bye.